Hello and welcome to the PPN Southeast Psychology Expanded podcast. I'm Mel Ray and I'll be your host today. This podcast gives NHS psychological professionals a personal voice and it offers them the opportunity to speak about their experiences of working within their roles and to allow our listeners to hear a bit about how to access those roles. We also like to look at the intricacies and the different ways of working in the different areas that you can work as a psychological professional within the NHS. This podcast comes as part of the PPN Southeast, and the PPN is a membership network for all psychological professionals and other people who are interested in NHS commissioned psychological healthcare. You can see the website link in the show notes below. In today's episode, we'll be talking to Claire Dunn. She's going to speak through her experience of transitioning from a long-term established career into the world of becoming a psychological professional. We're going to speak about the AP role and how to transition into that. We're also going to talk a little bit about dual identity, what it feels like working as a psychological profession who has both lived experience and identifies as a professional. And she's going to give a little bit of advice of anyone who's thinking about transferring from an established career into a psychological professional career. So let's welcome Claire. Thanks for joining us today. And this is a little bit of an alternative topic. So a lot of our previous episodes has been about specific job roles, but we're actually going to talk about a job role we've already covered today, which is the assistant psychologist job role, but we're talking about it in a little bit of a different context. So I'm really excited about this conversation. So to get a little bit of an idea of you, Claire, can you tell us sort of what you're doing now, what your role is, maybe a little bit of, for lack of a better word, where you've come from in your career?
Yes, of course. So my name is Claire Dunn. I'm an assistant psychologist. We work with children and young people in schools, offering a variety of interventions. I deliver one-to-one CBT-based interventions, small targeted group work, and we also work with parents of primary school children, and we deliver whole school approach interventions, so based on anxiety and low mood and the regulating emotions and teaching young people to develop strategies and how to do that. That's me at the moment, and I really enjoy that role. I've just had my 1-year anniversary in service, which is great. About me, so I'm not your average AP. I come with quite a different background, really. So I have initially, at the age of 20, I joined police, and within a few years I was promoted to police sergeant. So I have 18 years service as a police officer. And as you can imagine, dealing with a variety of incidents. I was frontline throughout my entire service, so responding to 999 calls, and also specialised as a custody sergeant as well. And I had a real interest in the backgrounds of the people that I worked with, and how they came to be, in that position they found themselves in, which was more often than not in a custody cell. And I kind of was really always very interested in unpeeling those layers, and found that the vast majority, if not all, of those offenders had experienced childhood trauma in some way or another. Unfortunately, in 2016, I was medically retired. I was diagnosed with PTSD arising from a number of quite traumatic incidents that I attended and dealt with. And I found myself kind of at the end of one career wondering what I'm going to do at the next. I then went into alternative education, so working with young people again, who weren't accessing full-time education, mainly for a variety of different reasons, but predominantly through challenging behaviour arising from mental health issues, arising from childhood trauma, once again. And it was from there, really, that I decided, okay, I want to kind of revisit psychology. I'd studied it at A-level at the age of 16. And in a bit of a whim, really, just signed up for the psychology degree with the OU. And I started that in October 2018, part-time, so I carried on working. And here we are, 6 years later. A little bit of a journey.
Absolutely. I was literally about to say that. I mean, what a really interesting sort of journey into the world of psychology. And we spent quite a few of the previous episodes, and I know that me and you, Claire, outside of the episodes, have spent quite a few conversations around that sort of real typical gold standard journey into psychology. And it's so refreshing to hear that that's not always the way. So I've been jotting down multiple places to go. So we'll try and keep it as streamlined as possible, but I can't promise anything. So you've done 18 years in the police force. You've medically retired because of your own trauma.
Yeah.
And then you pursue this already sort of ingrained or already passionate want to understand people and decide to go into psychology, which is absolutely fantastic. So I know that we've spoken main aim clinical psychology. I guess I'm wondering, with your background, did you ever think about forensic psychology, or was clinical the sort of thing you thought about? What kind of pushed you towards clinical when your background's forensic?
Well, initially when I started the degree, I kind of had it in my head, right, I want to be a child psychologist, obviously not really knowing that, you know, as psychologists, we tend not to, and we don't train in child or adult like nursing. So I kind of always knew I wanted to work with children, but forensic was obviously an initial pull for me, and certainly working with young offenders, either within the community, young offenders services, or in prison. However, I did a little bit more research, and I kind of felt that going down that route would have closed quite a lot of doors off to me to have that specialism. And with some research, I actually realised quite quickly that as a clinical psychologist, you can work in a forensic setting. So for me, that seemed like the obvious choice, to keep as many options open as possible. Because as we know, you know, as we continue on this journey, our interests do change, and certainly my interests have changed even in the last year. So yeah, I definitely have an interest in forensic psychology, 100%.
But you feel like you want to get that sort of ability to work broadly, and then potentially later on you can hone down into a specialty if you wanted to.
Yeah,
which makes absolute sense. It does.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think as we grow and evolve as professionals and practitioners, our interests and passions do kind of change, don't they, over time?
Absolutely.
And I felt clinical psychology kept as many doors open as possible.
18 years in the police force, what does it feel like to make that transition from an established career to an unestablished career? I don't know if that's the right term, but I'm hoping you know what I mean.
So from leaving the police to actually joining the NHS was around 7 years. So I'd kind of already gone from that, we call it like a transition back into civvy world. So the civilian world. And that's quite a difficult one. So having been a police officer for 18 years, suddenly I found myself as a civilian, a normal member of public, which in one respect was a relief, but in another was difficult because that had kind of been my identity for so long. So I think having that 7-year break and back in what we call the civvy world and working in alternative education and not in senior post was probably advantageous really and beneficial for me. However, coming into the NHS as a band 4, you are regarded kind of junior in some respects. Obviously, I don't have a postgrad education in healthcare. And you'd find yourself kind of in a team with registered nurses, registered social workers, practitioners, and some really highly skilled individuals for which, I owe my life to really for the last year, because they provided me with so much support and guidance and sharing their knowledge. However, I did find myself very excited with my ID badge that said Assistant Psychologist, because I'd been told repeatedly how impossible it is to get an AP post. And actually for me, I didn't have that struggle. And I actually had 2 job offers to choose from. So I was in a really good position. So I arrived with my shiny new ID badge, so chuffed with myself. I felt like I was at my first day at school. But I think there was just this lack of understanding. Okay, well, we know what an EMHP does. We know what a mental health nurse does. But what does an assistant psychologist do? And I think, on the whole, a lot of APs come straight out of uni, kind of, 21, 22. And there was this stereotype really that I'd rocked up, and I had nothing to offer. I had this psychology degree, but because others hadn't studied psychology, didn't actually understand the skills that I had developed from those 3 years, which for me actually were 5, because I did it over 5 years. So it was difficult, but I dusted myself off, and I thought that's okay, because one day I will qualify as a clinical psychologist, and I will make changes to how we welcome in and embrace APs, because without APs we don't have psychologists.
Yeah.
So it's such a fundamental, crucial, stepping stone.
A lot of the groundwork that's done to keep a service running is done by the admin and the AP staff, and absolutely psychologists and practitioners and therapists are, the absolute meat of the service. There's no point having a service without them. Without those bones and foundations, meat quickly falls to the ground, So I think, sorry for any vegetarians out there, I've just used a meat analogy. Not ideal.
And APs, provide vital kind of contributions into services. I think is often overlooked and undervalued, and that needs to change.
100%.
And this is something I kind of, thinking about my career, I'm very mindful that as I progress, and I'm incredibly ambitious, and like what my 10-year plan looks like, I want to kind of be engaged in making some of those changes, because I think it's really important to kind of come out having, spent 3 years doing a psychology degree, for most fighting often years to get an AP post, and then to kind of have that sense of being undervalued. It isn't productive, and it's not good for retention and retaining people to actually, continue to pursue that career. I know APs that have just thrown the towel in because there is no progression.
Join the PPN-SE Aspiring Psychologist Community of Practice. This is a safe forum where aspiring psychologists can share their collective and individual knowledge and skills. The focus is on clinical, professional, and workforce issues, and will provide a space for aspiring psychologists to reflect on their work in the NHS and the journey to qualified psychologist training routes. This is free to join. All aspiring psychologist community of practice members must be PPN-SE register members. Both memberships are free. Visit the PPN-SE website for more details.
As a whole, the team I work with are amazing. And they've been really, really supportive of me. And, now they know more, have a better understanding of what I can offer as an AP. There's definitely real mutual respect there. And I'm very, very fortunate to find myself in that position because I know that's not the experience of all APs. But as a whole, my service and we're working to improve AP experiences, and I'm supporting that at the moment to try and make that that transition into the service as an AP a more fulfilling and smoother experience for all.
And I mean, that's great work. And I think that's what we should be doing as APs in all of our services, is really helping that transition. But I think that, we definitely have to take some ownership in that. I just want you to have a think about your time in the police force, coming out through no fault of your own, transitioning in civi world, coming into the NHS. And I wanted to have a think about what your identity is. So please stop me if it's not something you don't want to talk about. That's absolutely fine. I know it can be a tough topic for some people, but I see myself as someone with a dual identity. I am both someone with a lived experience of mental health challenges and a professional. And I feel like that really brings me almost like a little bit of a super strength in my job role. And I'm just wondering, you left because of this diagnosis of PTSD. You've got your own trauma. You're now working in a trauma-informed service, working with trauma. I'm just wondering, transitioning from police trauma to NHS trauma, how is that feeling?
It feels better, if I'm honest, because as a police officer, you are responding to people in crisis, and people who are on the brink of suicide, and we are the first port of call. I spent 3 hours talking a young male in his 20s over from the wrong side of a high-rise building, and he wasn't holding on. And to have that experience and to understand the trauma that he was going through, and to get him back over, and get him a full assessment, was rewarding. However, I don't know what happened to him after. And I did really, really struggle with that. And, working in alternative education with young people with enduring mental health difficulties, I was there, as a support worker, to deliver education. The traumas would be very open and transparent and want to talk about their traumas. However, I didn't have any formal training to kind of offer any support. So that was lacking. So, I've gone from emergency service into education, where I kind of I was more engaged and was able to establish more of their story and an understanding, but not able to help in that way. And then this next step is a really positive one, because I can actually now offer interventions. And I think, having had lived experience of mental health myself, I think for anybody working within mental health to have had lived experience can only enhance, your understanding, empathy, to support. And we don't need to share that in order to offer that. And I think that's really positive, actually. We don't need to share, I know how you're feeling because I have experienced this. We don't need to do that. But I just think having had those lived experiences puts you in a much better position to, to really understand how it is to walk in their shoes.
Yeah. It increases that level of empathy, doesn't it? Like you can almost feel it in the room with them, and that's such a positive, as long as we're using supervision to take care of ourselves.
Absolutely. And having experienced CBT myself, I think to be now delivering CBT based interventions, to have that insight as to what it's like to be on the other end of that. And I'm certainly very mindful when, with CBT, giving very overwhelmed people homework, for example, to do. Having, had experienced CBT myself with, at the time, 2 very young children as a single parent, to be then given an extra job to bring back the next week was so overwhelming. And that's something I've kind of carried through into now. So I'm very mindful, with these interventions, there is an element of homework and self-reflection required between sessions. But I'm really, really mindful that if somebody is very overwhelmed, that could just be that last straw.
Yeah.
That, we don't want to make coming to session overwhelming, and for them to feel that it's another job they have to complete that day or that week.
And I guess it adds on what I've certainly found through my own lived experience and professional experiences, adding in that homework sometimes also adds in another layer of failure, of I just haven't been able to get to it, and now I'm failing again, and why should I go because I'm failing again. And I think you're right, really being able to have lived experience of that and understand what that feels like. Absolutely the homework's got a place, and our service users have to take their own level of charge and control as well, which is what the homework sort of allows them to do. But I think that there's definitely a way to do that in a bespoke and empathetic way based on someone's holistic experience. And I think being in that situation like you and like I have, I think really allows us to build that skill.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to change up the last question. So anyone who's listened to us before will know that my last question is normally, throughout your whole journey, what would you look back and tell yourself? But you're still in your journey, so I'm going to change it up a little bit.
I'm still at the beginning, really.
You're not at the beginning, you're 2 rungs up. You've done your degree, you've got your AP job. You're in the ladder. You're in the ladder.
I've started the application. I think that's 2.5.
Oh God, that's like 7. Just starting the application takes 3 runs, I'm sure of it. So my question to you, Claire, is you've transitioned from one career where you were embedded and you were confident and comfortable in your career, and you've joined one that is potentially less concrete for you at the moment. If there's somebody listening that is thinking that they want to change from an established career into the world of psychology and AP-ness, what advice are you going to give them, being that you have done it yourself?
Yeah, my advice would be firstly to ask yourself, how much do you want it? Because you need to have a lot of passion and dedication. certainly to pursue this career. You know, to leave, or having left an established career, you know, at 36, was I 36? No, 38. I was medically retired at 38. And I just thought, I don't want to be defined by the person I was, my identity as a police officer. I want a new identity. So it's a long journey. I had, you know, I've got 2 children. I have a husband, and kind of enrolling and making that commitment to study a degree is a lot, and juggling doing a degree. And I did mine with the Open University. Part-time is a lot. Being a mum and working and running a home, and maintaining friendships and trying to have some kind of work-life balance is a lot. But if it's something you feel passionate about, then go for it. It's never too late. You're never too old. I'm 46 now. I always had a 10-year plan, and that 10-year plan was 6 years for a degree. I was optimistic when I thought 1 year as an AP, but that's not quite the case. But I actually managed to do my degree in 5, so I gained an extra year. And the plan was always I start the degree at 40 and I qualify as a clinical psychologist at 50. And that's still the plan. But you need to have that passion and drive. And if you have that, then just go for it. Life is long. You know, our professional careers are long, and they're getting longer. You know, I joined the NHS at 45, and I think I'm going to get a good 25 years in the NHS. I think 70's not really old anymore, is it? Like
No.
it used to be. But if you've got that drive, you've got that ambition, and you're passionate, then you'll do well. That's all you need. You just need that real, you know, deep desire to succeed. And if I had £1 for every single person that said, well, you know, it's really competitive getting onto the doctorate, have you thought about doing this route instead? Or have you thought about doing this? I'd never have to work again. But actually I choose to work because I find the work I do really meaningful. So I choose to do it regardless. But I'm very focused on I started this journey with my end goal as being a qualified psychologist within whatever field. And that is my end goal. And I'm still very, very focused on that. So I would just say to anybody thinking about it, just keep pushing. And I always refer back to J.K. Rowling, you know, Harry Potter, all of the publishers that said no, all of the rejections she got. Yeah, and it took her years and years, to get her story, her books off the ground. And look at her now, never give up. You get rejected once, keep going. You get rejected a second time, you know, with the application, with your AP post, just keep going. You will get there in the end.
Thank you so much, Claire, for just sharing your sort of alternative journey into the workforce with us. Thank you.
No, thank you for having me on and for letting me, inviting me to share my story.
That was Claire Dunn speaking about her transition from an established career into psychology. And the next episodes following, we'll have an episode on talking to somebody who's an expert about experience. We'll have an episode on counselling psychology, and we've got episodes on the child wellbeing practitioner and senior wellbeing practitioner roles coming up too. So if you'd like to hear from a certain role, professional, or hear about a topic or issue that we haven't discussed before, then feel free to message the PPN Southeast on X, or you can email us on the email address below. Please remember that if you want updates and access to PPN Southeast information, then you can become a member of the PPN by visiting the PPN website. And again, all of those details are in the show notes below. Registration and membership to the PPN and the PPN Southeast is completely free. So thank you guys for listening to us again, and we hope that you have a good couple of weeks, and we hope to see you soon. All right, bye.